Welcome to the Lux Files, a podcast for occultists about occultists. I'm your host, Sean, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Be sure to subscribe to the Lux Files wherever you get your podcasts to stay up to date on all the new episodes. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 29 of the Lux Files. I'm here today with magician, writer, and host of the Arnemancy podcast, Erik Arneson, and you may know him better as Reverend Erik. So welcome.
Well, thank you. I like how you know what episode number this is. I feel like there's a lot of confidence there. Like, what if I'm like, hold on, I don't want this to be released for like another 4 weeks?
You know, first of all, every time I do an episode, I always say, oh, this is episode whatever, just assuming it's the right number. Mm-hmm. And I've only got it wrong. No, I've got them all right. I posted on Twitter one wrong, but yeah, somehow I managed to get them all right. I think when I start season 2, because I'll go back to, maybe like season 2, episode 1, or maybe I'll just keep, I don't know. I'll screw up at some point. Yeah, I'll screw up at some point, but I just, no one cares. No one cares what I have to say.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they aren't gonna. Yeah, that's probably true.
Well, first of all,
no one care what you have to say.
Yeah, no one's gonna like, oh, I'm never listening to that podcast.
I can't believe you said 29 instead of 30.
Right. No one cares what I have to say. They're not here for me. They're here for the guests. Yeah, so I just wing it. I just assume I'm saying the right things, and as long as I get the guests' names right, everything else I say just really doesn't matter. So.
I mean, all right. Well,
So Fred, thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me. So, how's everything? Wait, you're the guest. You asked some questions. You're the host.
Right. Yeah, no, I'm the host. My last guest, halfway through the podcast, he turned the tables on me, and he's like, okay, I'm the host now. I'm going to start asking you questions, which, I mean, you're more than welcome to do, because I had John Tenney did that to me as well. He's like, okay, I'm going to start asking you questions. I'm like, bring it on. I mean, it's all good.
I mean, if I have questions at some point, I might ask them of you, or maybe I will just, write them down somewhere and spring them on you later.
There you go. There you go. I need to drink. I need to be half drunk when I do my podcast, because I think it would be more fun for like the guests to spring surprise questions on me, and they'll be like, oh, what city do you live in? And I'm like, I don't know, episode 29. I don't know. I'm drunk.
I mean, you're in Canada somewhere, right? So there's like one city up there.
Well, no, there's 2 cities, and I'm located near neither of them. I'm in Thunder Bay, province of Ontario. So I'm on Lake Superior. So I'm basically central Canada, and I'm near nothing. Like, you have to drive 8 hours, either west or east, to get to another city. I mean, there's little towns along the way, but there's.
I mean, I've seen Nightbreed.
I don't know what that is.
Ooh, you should put it in your list of movies to watch.
Okay.
It's got monsters. It's based on a Clive Barker story. It takes place in rural Canada.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the 2 cities that exist in Canada, I'm near neither of them. So yeah.
Oh man, the inhabitants of the other 2 cities are going to be really pissed off that we didn't say there were 4.
Right. When I lived in Texas, that was really nice, because I lived in Houston and also in Austin, and that was nice because you could, you didn't have to drive very far, very long to be somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And there's some great, little towns and whatnot in Texas that are worth, kind of exploring and whatnot. So that's nice having, you know, lots of, and plus two, not having winter. I mean, the winters up here, like the one highway that transects or bisects, whatever the proper word is, Canada, the Trans-Canada Highway, often gets shut down because, you know, the weather's so bad in the middle of winter. So I mean, yeah, in wintertime, like I'm not about to hop in my car and start driving anywhere. You know what I mean? So it's just, it's very, yeah, it's different. Different.
Okay, well, enough about Canada.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, let's now you have to ask me some questions.
Yeah, there you go.
All right.
Okay. Yeah, so yeah, you know, we're gonna just jump right in then.
Okay, let's do it.
Because no one wants to hear about Canada. So so as I was explaining to you before we hit record, and all of my listeners know by now, is I like to start right at the beginning and explore that moment or like series of events that got you kind of started on your you know, magical path, spiritual path, like however you want to define it. So that's a great place to start.
Yeah, it is a great place to start, and it's actually kind of a difficult thing for me to pin down exactly. Like I wasn't raised in a very religious family, so we didn't go to like a Christian church or anything of that nature. In fact, I've never really been a member of a church, really. But we did go to a Unitarian Universalist congregation, or Unitarian Universalist church, whatever. Maybe does that count as a church? Possibly. And so I guess I had sort of an early exposure to like spirituality, or at least I don't know, a sense of like the importance of a spiritual community without ever getting indoctrinated into anything.
Yeah.
And in fact, I remember, you know, I was like a Boy Scout when I was a kid, and one of the merit badges is like the religion merit badge, and it involved like all, you know, answering all these questions about your church. And I remember going to my dad and being like, none of this makes any sense. And he's like, I don't know what Unitarians do for this merit badge. Let's talk to the Unitarian Pope or whatever they had. And like, so there's some sort of central Unitarian Universalist I don't know, council or authority, and they sent me like this little workbook, like what is a Unitarian Universalist, and I don't really remember any, but it's not something that really stuck with me.
I would just assume they'd all be like pot smoking hippies, I would think.
Well, I mean, I would guess, yeah, it was a long time ago, so it's hard for me to really have a sense of how much pot smoking was going on there, you know, because I was like, there was still like a youth group, so it was, you know, a bunch of adults who, you know, shoved their kids off into a youth group, and we played Dungeons and Dragons in the bathroom of the Unitarian church, which I think, yeah, we met in a fraternal hall, like a Knights of Pythias hall. So maybe Dungeons and Dragons was my first exposure to the occult.
Right. Okay.
But what I do recall is when I was a kid, we used to take frequent, you know, sort of like weekend trips out to the coast. And there's this little town on the Oregon coast called Bandon that is, it's adorable. If you live in Oregon and you haven't gone out to see Bandon, you should do that. It's a really cute little town. And back then in the 80s, there was a bookstore there that had, you know, like tarot cards and witchy shit. And I remember getting, this is another thing I can't totally recall, but I got a tarot deck at one point, and I got some books on Wicca, probably like a Raymond Buckland book or a Scott Cunningham book.
Right. Yeah.
And, that was kind of my early exposure. Although even
like, how old were you at that point?
You know, I was probably junior high, like maybe 8th grade.
Okay.
Maybe, you know, my folks didn't really care. I mean, they sort of just encouraged me to read whatever I wanted to read and let me explore whatever I wanted to explore. And so I guess I had kind of a, you know, I mean, and even that doesn't feel totally like it was the beginning, because I know that there were times before that when I was like studying, you know, the UFO books and secret society books and like the, you know, like the Time Life series books and all that kind of stuff, and
Yeah.
getting exposed to all of this, the weird stuff very early on. And then in the late 90s, I started studying like Hermetic Kabbalah. I had this, by that time I was living in Ashland, Oregon, and I had this teacher named Merrill Ward who was teaching like a Hermetic Kabbalah class. And I think that was probably in like 1999.
Okay.
And after that, I started getting into ceremonial magic. And so I would say probably around 99, 2000 is when I really started to get serious.
Right. Like when you were in junior high and you got these books, and I guess they didn't have the biggest impression on you because you were like, they were like Buckland or Cunningham or something.
Yeah.
So do you at least remember, like, did you actually, you read the books and be like, oh, I want to try this ritual or this spell? Or
I remember one that really had a huge impact on me was Scottish Witchcraft, which I think is a Scott Cunningham book.
Okay.
And, you know, I mean, I loved that book. I actually like remember going to like a Highlands game thing somewhere in Oregon and buying like a dirk and thinking like, oh, I'm going to be a Scottish witch. I mean, I'm not even remotely Scottish. I don't know what the hell I was thinking, but I did get like a really cool dirk, you know, like a nice long dirk. And I was sort of like, this is it. I've got a magical tool. I had like an altar set up. Like I was doing I was basically a baby witch.
Yeah.
You know, at some point, you know, I identify with a lot of baby witches on Twitter.
Right.
But yeah, I guess the Wicca thing didn't really stick. Because, you know, once I found ceremonial magic, it was game over. Yeah. Probably because of Satan.
So how did you discover ceremonial magic? Like through more book buying?
Oh God. Okay, that is also a really good question. I suppose probably what happened is I continued going to like weird bookstores and buying weird books. And at some point, I did get like some books on Kabbalah. I think probably like the first Kabbalah book I got was either Dion Fortune's Mystical Kabbalah, or just I went like super off the deep end and got you know, Arya Kaplan's translation of the Sefer Yetzirah with all of his commentary. You know, the silver book, the one that like I couldn't even read it.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
I remember bringing it home and being like, ooh, this looks cool and weird. Yeah. I remember like opening it up and starting to read through, and just his commentary on like chapter 1, I was like, oh God, I'm lost. And it took me like 4 tries to ever read that book.
Yeah.
I mean, 4 tries in like 2 decades, you know, I mean, it was a so I think that probably, I think it was probably just something I never really like gave it up or stopped doing it. I just expanded my boundaries and just started exploring other things. And then, you know, in my mid-20s, I had kind of this feeling like you know, I suppose probably a lot of occultists, especially ones who get like really into ceremonial magic and stuff, they kind of have a feeling of otherness or like not belonging, or like something isn't finished or something hasn't started. Like there's a thing that hasn't happened that has to, right?
Yeah.
And so I was sort of dealing with this, and I was kind of like, you know, maybe I need to look for like some sort of initiation. Maybe I need to be like taken through some sort of weird ass ceremony, you know, like the good old, like the old days, you know?
Right.
So in the same year, I started a really serious study program going through Donald Michael Craig's Modern Magic with an online group. I think it was a Yahoo Groups email group.
Okay, yeah.
And called Tamarisk Crescent. I know that there's still some of the Tamarisk Crescent people out there. I've lost touch with a lot of them, but I still know where a few of them are. And at the same time, I also pursued membership in Freemasonry. So I got initiated into Freemasonry and started doing ceremonial magic right around the same time. And that, you know, again, it was like an incubator, you know, it was still all of this stuff. It took forever for me to really kind of come into my own.
Yeah.
But very shortly, like just after a couple years of being a Freemason, John Michael Greer moved into my neighborhood and became my like next door neighbor. He was like
Interesting.
a block away.
Okay.
Yeah, we had met. I think we'd met online on like a Masonic discussion group, and when he moved into the neighborhood, and I got a chance to meet him, and for realsies, and we were both like, "Holy shit, this is like weird city now." And I used to kind of go over to his house, and he would like walk me through various Golden Dawn techniques or stuff out of Agrippa or like all this stuff. And this is this was almost 20 years ago, probably maybe 18 years ago, something like that. So it was kind of before he had become way into like astrology and pick-a-trick stuff. But he had a library to be envied. And
right.
I remember his wife, I think, had this like trunk full of tarot cards that she brought out to show me one day. And I'm like looking through it, and she's like, these are just the decks I use. We've got another trunk in the back. I'm like, holy crap, that's a lot of tarot. But that was a pretty big influence on me. Like he really sort of taught me a lot of cool stuff. So I was kind of fortunate in both, getting early lessons in Hermetic Kabbalah from Merrill Ward, who I believe is kind of like a muckety muck in the OTO in the United States now. Okay. I'm not totally sure. I haven't really kept track of that. But having him, and then later on John Michael Greer, and then through Freemasonry, I also met a number of other really interesting and amazing esotericists, like Jay Kinney, who was the editor of Gnosis magazine.
Oh yeah, okay.
Or one of the editors. He was a co-editor of Gnosis magazine. And so I made a lot of really good contacts, and it really helped a lot to kind of have, I didn't have like a local magical group that I was a part of. Like I never joined the OTO or anything of that nature. But I had, like that online group, Tamarisk Crescent, which ended up being a very, very influential for me, and, helping me figure out a lot of magic stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then having John Michael Greer as a neighbor was certainly helpful.
No kidding. Now, with this, I'm trying to think, you said this was like what, like 18, 20 years ago?
Yeah, it was the early 2000s.
So he would have been involved in the AODA at that point?
Yes.
Okay.
He was not he hadn't like risen through the ranks to become the Grand Archdruid or whatever yet. But there was an AODA chapter down there, and I did go to some AODA events. At least I think it was AODA.
What was that like?
It was interesting. I was much more shy and socially awkward back then than I am now. I might still be socially awkward now, but I'm just not as shy about it.
Right. Yeah.
So, I never really was like upfront and taking part in these things. I was sort of like out on the fringes. I think I just went to a few events, but one of them I remember was oh man, I'm going to get all the details of this wrong. I remember that the central deity of the event was Bridget.
Okay.
So is that
probably Imulk, maybe?
Imulk, yes, probably Imulk.
Yeah.
And that was really cool. Like I remember, there were just various rituals and stuff. And there's a pretty good group. I think there were like 20 people there.
Okay.
Southern Oregon has a really good pagan community that's sort of like buried in the hills, so they're around, but they're kind of scattered and very witchy and stuff. But yeah, that was kind of I never really joined the AODA either. I stuck with Freemasonry. I wasn't really interested in joining any sort of organization that would force me to have a specific religion or anything of that nature. So I held out for a really long time. But then another really interesting thing happened during that period of time that I just thought about. Speaking of religions, I got a copy of The Way of Hermes, which is Clement Solomon's translation of the Corpus Hermeticum. And while reading that, I had what I could only describe as like a religious awakening, religious experience where
Okay.
I was suddenly like, holy shit, I'm a hermeticist. Like this is like singing to me. This book sings to me, like these words, the images that they conjure, the message that it has, like, you know, the confusion inherent in this particular chunk of like ancient scriptures. Like it just really, really spoke to me in a really powerful and impactful way.
Okay.
And that set me down the path that I'm still on.
Okay.
You know? Yeah.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
God, John Michael Greer was your neighbor. That's
I know.
fascinating. That's
Yeah, just
really
for a
awesome.
few years. I'm still in touch with him sometimes. We exchange emails and stuff, but he lives way out on the East Coast somewhere now. I totally do not remember where, but
Right.
but we were neighbors for a few years.
Interesting. I came across, well, I became aware of the AODA after I joined OBOD, the Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids. And, you know, their two forms of druidry are very different.
Mm-hmm.
So he published 3 books, maybe more at this point, but at this point, in the past, 3 books about like the AODA kind of style of druidry, and it's more like, you know, lodge style, as opposed to, you know, rolling around in the dirt druidry, like my style of druidry. And my, you know, so my interest in druidry and my interest in ceremonial magic, you know, kind of, so it intrigued me, the AODA. I mean, I never joined. I didn't see much point in it because, you know, like if there was like a lodge, local lodge, then, you know, then yeah, I would join, but, you know.
Yeah, you know, this might have actually been an OBOD group too. I do not remember. Because I know that when John Michael talked about that kind of stuff, he mentioned both OBOD and the AODA because I believe he was a member of both.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I know that. So I mean, he was also like at the time he was publishing a lot.
Yeah.
He got started early and he sort of had this goal. I remember him talking about like I have to publish 1 book a year if it's gonna, you know, support me.
Right.
Because, you know, occult books don't sell super well.
Yeah.
Like sometimes there'll be like a breakthrough occult book that sells like 100,000 copies, but, you know, most of the time it's, you know, small change. So he was publishing a lot, and yeah, I've got a pretty good number of John Michael Greer books where he signed them. But also it was, you know, during a period of time where, you know, Llewellyn wasn't always on top of their editing game. So I'm to him like, John Michael, I just got your new book, and all of the page numbers in the index are off by 2. So a lot of the notes that he had, the inscriptions that he wrote to me in his books are like really smarmy, sarcastic remarks about like, I hope the index is good enough for you, Erik.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
But yeah, that was pretty fun. It was really interesting. I think that was kind of the first point. Like he taught me how to make planetary talismans.
Okay.
And I just remember so I remember the process because we had like the 2 big black books, you know, the big black Golden Dawn book and the big black Agrippa book. And he's like, okay, now go to this section in the Golden Dawn book and you have to cross-reference it with this stuff in Agrippa. And I unfortunately I lost both of those.
Oh no.
I have new copies now, but the copies that I had then, like I was just scribbling notes in the margins and like taking notes and, you know, dog-earing pages and leaving bookmarks in them, and they're gone. But it's cool, you know. It was before we never really did any sort of like astrological elections for the planetary talismans, and I never got really amazing results from them back then either. So, you know.
Yeah. Interesting. Interesting. So, okay, so let's, you know, I kind of pulled you back to John Michael Greer. So you discovered Hermeticism and you fell in love. And where did that take you?
Well, it took me, I'm not sure that it really altered my course a whole lot right away, since, you know, a lot of the stuff that I was doing was Golden Dawn magic, and there wasn't really a lot of other options. You know, I think knowing about sort of more of the history of what was going on in the greater occult world during that period of time, you know, that was when sort of like grimoire magic started to become more popular and all that kind of stuff was sort of going on. But I didn't really get super exposed to that. Like, I don't know if I was part of the wrong circles on the internet or what was going on, or if I was, you know, too wrapped up in my own bullshit to really pay attention. But I didn't really start to get a good picture of sort of like the greater kind of like occult atmosphere, you know, all this other stuff that was going on until I moved to Portland, at least like 2011, probably, maybe later. And that's when I really started to realize that there was a lot more going on with this hermetic stuff. I mean, during that period of time, like, I'd taken a few trips to Amsterdam and visited like the J.R. Rittman Library, you know, the Hermetic Library in Amsterdam, and I had gotten, you know, like the oh god, I can't remember the name of the scholar. I got like the Dutch translation of the Corpus Hermeticum in Asclepius, and I got, you know, so I was still studying and reading about it and getting exposed to stuff. I'd somewhere during that period of time, I got really interested in kind of like Renaissance magic and Renaissance studies, because there was that big, you know, there was like the rebirth of Hermeticism happened in the 15th century in Italy. And so I had started reading like Francis Yates and Mary Carruthers and like all that kind of stuff that was sort of like exploring like Hermeticism and the art of memory in the Renaissance. I'd been getting really into like esoteric Freemasonry and doing a lot of studies with that. And so that was sort of taking a lot of my time.
What's when you say esoteric Freemasonry, like, what do you mean by that? Like through books or through your membership in the Masons?
Both for sure. You know,
so what is esoteric Masonry?
Freemasonry?
Like, yeah, you know.
All right. Well, let's take a step back and talk about just like Freemasonry in general. Like, Freemasonry at its most sort of surface level is a fraternity. You know, it's a club. You know, the largest branches of Freemasonry are male only, so it's usually kind of like a men's club. And you know, it's all based around ritual. Like, if anybody out there has ever become an initiated Wiccan or a member of the OTO, or even a druid, like an AODA druid or something, you have seen ritual that is directly descended from Freemasonry. So you have an idea of what it's like. You know, there's usually prayers and walking around in circles and blindfolds and maybe some swords and candles and lectures and like all that kind of stuff. Freemasonry sort of presupposes that its members, well, okay, I have to preface this by saying that I'm only really talking about the type of Freemasonry that I belong to. Not all Freemasonry follows the same pattern. It's an old, broad, very diverse system. So there's a lot of different ways that people might experience it. But in America, at least in Oregon, what I experienced, you know, it sort of presupposed that its members would have a belief in a supreme being. So most of Freemasonry uses like architectural allegory and metaphor to teach a system of virtue, which is an interesting start. And at its basis, you know, that's great, right? Like, it basically gives a system where people can, you know, learn more about being tolerant and understanding other people, and, you know, doing charity work and being part of a community, and, you know, all that kind of stuff, giving back to the community, those sorts of things. And a lot of Masonic lodges do, or at least used to do, a really good job of that before they started shrinking. You know, Masonic lodges would support public schools, and they would do scholarships for students, and they would, you know, do charity drives and have various charities that they support and that sort of stuff. But the esoteric side of Freemasonry is interesting because there's something deeper and more philosophical and more mystical going on in Freemasonry that is, it really does not take very much looking to see it. You know, you
Right.
peel back like the first layer of the onion, and there's just this wealth of strangeness hidden in its rituals and hidden in its symbolism. You know, conspiracy theorists love that stuff.
Right. Yeah.
They get all of it wrong, but
Yeah.
there's just all of this beautiful esoteric meaning hidden in Freemasonry. A lot of it ends up was ignored for so much of the 20th century that we kind of like lost a lot of info. Like there are a lot of broken links, but
Okay.
if you just go looking a little bit, you see these things like there's this stuff that I call like Masonic superpowers, which are like written about in some of our old documents, like the Mason's Word, or which was some sort of like second sight thing, or there is like apparently an ability for Masons to be able to communicate across vast distances through some, you know, psychic power or something.
Interesting.
Or
Okay.
yeah, or one that is really interesting is apparently Masons were taught a secret way to read the Bible.
Oh, okay.
Which I never saw any evidence of in my lodge, but
Mhm.
in some of our earliest kind of like you know, secret lectures, these sort of things are kind of like mentioned. And so I'm
Okay.
like, oh, well, that's enticing, but you know, it's apparently lost now, so who knows. But even beyond that, like in the Masonic ritual that is sort of extant across the United States today, which dates back to a lot of the parts of it date back to like the 1790s or early 1800s. There's just stuff in the ritual that some of it might be wording that's left over from earlier versions. Some of it might be stuff that was stuck in by 18th century Masons who are like, ooh, look at this thing that we're doing, and here's how it's going in the ritual now. You know, there are things involving like esoteric interpretations of like Jacob's ladder, or there's a whole section in one of the rituals that talks about like the divine nature of memory and how the art of memory is sort of like the mystical core of Freemasonry and how Freemasonry managed to survive. And there's just all this like really beautiful stuff that's kind of like hidden in plain sight in the Masonic ritual. So I spent a lot of time kind of exploring that, along with some really, really like important and influential people in my life that I'd met through Freemasonry, met through the craft.
So when you're exploring esoteric Freemasonry, is what does that mean? Like, are you with, you know, some other like fellow Masons and you're trying to, I don't know, uh,
It is a
it,
combination of stuff. I mean, there's not really like a system, you know. It's basically meaning that is hidden in the ritual in various ways. So there are Masons now who are kind of like exploring this. Probably the most public and the most available work would be C.R. Dunning. He's published a couple of books. I think one of them is called Contemplative Masonry, and then he has one that just came out that I edited actually called The Contemplative Lodge. Looking at those, you know, you'll see that there's a lot of influence from C.R. Dunning's other work in other esoteric orders, but but the other esoteric orders are descended from Freemasonry to begin with. So
mhm.
he's sort of like backporting stuff that people have developed who came out of Freemasonry. And then he comes back, he's like, oh, well, we can use these to explore Masonic symbolism, Masonic imagery. So they're fascinating, amazing books. And yeah, anybody who wants to know more about like what esoteric Freemasonry is either looking like today or could be looking like in the future should pick those up.
Okay, okay. But so when you're saying like you were exploring esoteric Freemasonry, just as a like it's not like you were you you and other fellow Masons were extracting pieces from existing rituals that had, you know, an esoteric kind of flavor, and let's put together like a magic Mason kind of system.
Yeah, we did do that a little bit. There was some of
Okay.
that going on, but there was also a lot of like discussion, a lot of like philosophical
Right.
discussion or theological discussion that kind of like was exploring stuff that either the Masonic degrees we talk about, or, you know, a lot of Freemasonry. Freemasonry is a very syncretic system, like most systems, you know.
Yeah.
So you know, for instance, in Ashland, so John Michael Greer was part of my Masonic lodge in Ashland also.
Okay.
But another member of my lodge down there, Scott Carter, Father Scott Carter, I guess now he's been ordained. He was a really important mentor for me also. Like, he basically taught me kind of like the language of theology. Like, after lodge meetings, we would go to the Hong Kong Club in Ashland, and we would like drink brandy and smoke cigars and say hi to Bruce Campbell and talk about, like, you know, theurgy and you know, the nature of the divine, and, like, you know, panentheism and you know, all of this stuff that was sort of like I mean, it totally fed into, you know, my love of Hermeticism. You know, it was kind of around the same time. So I was sort of like, oh my God, this is all I need. You know, this is what I'm thirsty for. So that was sort of like a really big, that was a really, really impactful and important part of my life. You know, I learned a lot of stuff about how to think about these sorts of topics, how to talk about them, new things to explore, and new places to look. You know, like, I got introduced to like Plato and all of the Neoplatonists who came after him, and, you know, I read, you know, Thomas Taylor translations of like Iamblichus and all that kind of stuff, and Plotinus, and maybe Porphyry. I don't remember if I ever read Porphyry, but possibly. I assume if I'm going to keep my street cred, I should probably just claim to have read Porphyry.
So what was, you know, drawing out that magic in these Masonic rituals, what was that like? What was that experience?
It was a lesson in, I mean, I've never finished a college degree, so I'm very much like an amateur scholar, but doing that was a lesson in like analyzing historical texts, learning how to pull meaning out of historical texts and look for clues and understanding of stuff that, you know, was 200-300 years old, which led me, you know, which is just such a vital skill, you know, being able to do like a close reading of something, which is strange in Freemasonry, because a lot of the texts that we're looking at are parts of our ritual, you know, where I would probably hear, you know, like the candidates lecture, you know, 10 times a year or something like that. But probably not that often. No lodge grows that fast, really. But you know, you hear them a lot because you'd practice them, you'd learn them yourself. But there's so much to do. There's so much to like shove into your mind that you don't necessarily always do a close reading, even when you're memorizing.
Right.
So like sitting down and sort of being like, what does this mean when it's talking about, you know, the tools and symbols of architecture being expressive symbols, or what does it mean when it's talking about like, you know, Jacob's dream of a ladder and the way it reaches up to heaven, and like, what do these various things actually mean? Like, what am I actually saying out loud? Is there more meaning to it? Or am I just like pushing air through flapping meat?
Yeah.
You know? So a lot of it was just sort of like learning how to slow down and examine things closely.
And what documents did you have access to? Like just what your lodge had, or
almost all of it is publicly available, right? So a lot of it is like document. You can find almost all the stuff on archive.org. You know, the book M is a really interesting book. There's also the Philalethes Society republishes a lot of these things too, but you know, a lot of these are just, you know, manuscripts that are in libraries that people ignore. You know, it's the same thing that we see now in the occult community.
Yeah.
You know, where we've got like Joseph Peterson and Stephen Skinner being like, how come nobody's ever published this grimoire before? Why were you guys always ignoring this? It's because there's just an enormous amount of old manuscripts that, you know, a lot of the weird stuff just gets ignored. If it's too weird and your ancestors were doing it and you're just going to be like, I'll just leave that for some future generation.
Right. Yeah. Well, I guess, you know, if you're a Mason and you're not, you know, interested in, you know, the esoteric side of it, magic, anything like that, I guess you're going to look at some documents and be like, yeah, I'm just going to
pretend. Then you just skip it over. You're like, I don't need this. This has nothing to do with our spaghetti dinner.
Yeah, right. Yeah. That makes sense. That makes sense. That's interesting though. That's very interesting. I think that's talking about the rituals and the documents like that. I think that's great fodder for as you said, like the conspiracy
Oh yeah.
theorists. You know what I mean? I
Oh
love
yeah.
it. I
Yeah.
think it's fantastic.
I think one of the really interesting things that you can look at sort of in comparison, like if you go to, like the Golden Dawn knowledge lectures,
Mhm.
you can see that those are just packed full of all of this. Like, here's the ceremonial magic that you got to learn to be in the Golden Dawn. Here's the Kabbalah. Here's all this kind of stuff. But they say it like really plainly.
Mhm.
It's the Golden Dawn doesn't really make as much of a separation between like esoteric and exoteric. It's like, here are the knowledge lectures, here's all the stuff, here's all the symbolism. Like, it's sort of hammered home, like you're supposed to do esoteric stuff with this.
Yeah. Yeah.
With Freemasonry, it is set up so that it kind of almost feels like Freemasonry is a way for like the esoteric knowledge to kind of like ride along through generations of like nobody giving a shit about it, and then sort of like it percolates up every once in a while.
Yeah. And I mean that makes sense. Like all the, you know, uh the creators of the Golden Dawn, I mean, they were all Masons. So,
Mm-hmm.
in a way, you can look at the creation of the Golden Dawn like a magical branch of the Masons.
Oh
They
yeah.
wanted, the esoteric aspect, and it wasn't there in the lodge. So all of us Masons are going to get together and we're going to create a
Mm-hmm.
magical Masonic order, really.
Oh yeah, yeah. It really, I think it really, if you look at the way that their lodges are laid out and the degree systems work, like that, totally, it feels like that for sure.
Yeah.
But also, they started something. Well, I mean, they weren't even the start of it. That sort of idea of like the lodge system being a, clearinghouse or container for magical operations, probably started before the Golden Dawn. There were other kind of orders in the 1800s that were doing it, and even like the AODA, I think that came out of Freemasonry too, where it was at least partially inspired by it.
Oh no, it absolutely was. Before OBOD, so I joined OBOD in 2006, I think it was, and the Bardic grade, which is the first grade, the grade material was just freshly revised. And so at some point, it may have been a year or 2 years prior to that, I had ordered, they'd send, OBOD would send like the first month of the OBOD lesson for free, kind of like, here, check it out, blah, 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 blah.
Oh yeah, first
And
hits on us.
yeah.
Yeah.
And in one of the GWERs, they give sort of like a history knowledge lecture of OBOD, but of revival druidry. And I mean, it comes out of Masonry. The first group was like in 1717, and how they became more fraternal, more like a social organization, and then there were the offshoots, and then you got OBOD out of that and AODA out of that. But yeah, it's branches on a tree, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah. Actually, and that brings me back to a lecture that John Michael Greer used to give in Masonic lodges that he called it was a really clever name. It was something like the Really Big Chart lecture, where he had made like this big chart, multiple pieces of paper that he would like sort of stretch out and be like, here's Freemasonry, and here's all the branches of all the occult orders and fraternal groups and stuff that came off of it.
Well, I would think that all, Knights of Columbus,
Oh
the
yeah, Knights of
Royal Order of
Columbus
the
is.
Moose. I mean,
Mhm,
I would
yep.
think that all of them.
Yes, all of them.
Yeah.
Even, Wicca is kind of Freemasonry's grandchild,
Yeah.
which is interesting.
Now, when we say Wicca, we're not talking about 90s version of Wicca where
we're
Wicca
talking about like
and
initiatory
witchcraft, yeah.
Wicca, like
You know, back in the 90s publishing world, Wicca, witchcraft, and neo-paganism were all like just different words of the same thing. That's when we say Wicca in this instance, that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about witchcraft, and we're not talking about neo-paganism. Like we're talking about Wicca.
Right, like Gardnerian Wicca,
yeah,
where you have like the 3 degrees of initiation, you have the so mote it be, which is like Masonic wording, and you have you have things that are, I mean, I don't know what the Gardnerian ritual looks like, but yeah, it's definitely kind of, it's on the really big chart.
Yeah, and it's a lot more ceremonial than that neo-paganism that kind of grew out of the 60s and the 70s, and
that sort of like free form.
Yeah, the neo-paganism that you see in most publishing, especially in the 90s. It's more ceremonial than witchcraft. Like Wicca is a lot more ceremonial than I think people that don't know really anything about Gardnerian Wicca. It's a lot more ceremonial than they would think.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. Yeah. So that so I did a lot of sort of writing and research. A lot of research and writing went into that period of time. I spent a lot of time doing lectures at Masonic lodges. I published a lot in the Philalethes magazine, mostly book reviews, but like almost, in fact, I would say 90% of the stuff that I've had published has been in Masonic periodicals, research work and stuff. And some of it has just been like, some of it's been not super interesting, but there have been a few things, like a few rabbit holes I've gone down that have just produced some amazing stuff, like the Art of Memory in particular, and its sort of like historical context and the way that it really sort of like came back around and influenced my occult studies is that was a sentence that started off really strong. And at the time I got to the verb, I was like, what the hell was I saying? So much for the Art of Memory.
Right.
But well, anyhow, I guess that's what happened. Like in studying a lot of this stuff, I really went down sort of like the rabbit hole of the Art of Memory. And that research led me into just sort of this whole exploration of images. Image magic is basically like the very close kissing cousin of the Art of Memory. They are so intimately intertwined. Like they both use sort of the same techniques, the same reliance on imagination and imagery and artwork and all this kind of stuff. And I started to realize that there was like something super big there, which definitely started to kind of like inform my occult work. So when after moving to Portland in 2011, I was still active in Freemasonry. I still am active. I'm actually kind of taking a year off right now, but I'm still an active Freemason. But I then, in a period of unemployment and I guess revolt against society, I was like, ooh, I need to pay rent. I should probably do something. And I became a professional tarot reader. And during the course of that, I was kind of like, oh, I should probably try to make this a business. So I started like Arnemancy stuff. And I really quickly, I just became so disillusioned with it. I was like, I don't want to just write about tarot. Like this is annoying. I want to write about all this other stuff. So I started opening the Arnemancy blog up to more weirder things, where I was writing about Hermeticism and the Art of Memory and stuff like that. A lot of that. And then I, and now it's today. Okay, I'm done. That's it. That's my life.
Bye, everyone.
But I guess there was a period in there, like I think even when I came up to Portland, I was still doing like, you know, the Lesser Banishing Ritual, the Pentagram, and like all the Donald Michael Craig stuff.
Mm.
But I did really quickly, really soon after that, I sort of started exploring like grimoires and all of that other sort of stuff. And I started kind of slowly abandoning the Golden Dawn things. I mean, you know, you can never really get rid of the Golden Dawn. They got their weird, creepy little tentacles into everything. So you
Right.
still have to, you know. So I still use some stuff from them, but I started just exploring other techniques, other methods of ceremonial magic, a lot of older stuff. Like I really, at first, you know, grimoire stuff, and now a lot of like PGM stuff, pick
Okay.
tricks,
Mhm,
things like
mhm.
that.
What grimoires really that you work with that you're like, yeah, I like this?
I would have to say my favorite grimoire is the Arbitel,
Okay.
which I know is, so, you know, the grimoire traditions, most of them are fairly Christian.
Yeah.
And even the Arbitel is fairly Christian. But it's also pretty easy to sort of like strip out the Christian material in the Arbitel and still have kind of a working system.
Yeah.
But there's a feeling to the Arbitel that kind of like really emphasizes a lot of stuff that is kind of important in my practice. You know, there's this system of where it sort of like urges you to try to be virtuous and ethical, and where it sort of urges you to like be you know, I mean, because I guess what I'm super interested in more than anything else is kind of like the theurgy aspect of it. You know, the reaching upwards, the
Mhm.
like ascent of the soul through the spheres and that sort of stuff. And I guess of the grimoires that I've worked with, Arbitel has been the one that I've enjoyed the most and possibly had the most success with. You know, I mean, the Arbitel is mostly about like spirit contact, so that's kind of its thing. It doesn't really have like a recipe book of magic spells in it.
Yeah. It's a nice little elegant grimoire.
Yeah.
It really
Yeah,
is.
although I bet Sam Block would argue that it's not a grimoire, so
Well,
it doesn't have a collection of spells. But you know, he's not on the podcast.
exactly. Exactly. You know, it's a lovely grimoire.
Sam.
Yeah. We love you, Sam. Yeah. What about Enochian? How does that turn your crank?
I have never worked with Enochian, actually.
Mhm. Okay.
I do have some books about it. I've looked at it and I've kind of been like, well, gosh, that looks really complicated. I am not a man of many props. So I don't really, you know, I mean, I guess a lot of my magic I do keep relatively simple. You know, I mean, I've got altars and, you know, the candles and the incense and, you know, amulets and talismans and stuff like that. But like, I don't really have the, Enochian just looks like a lot of work to me. You know, like just so much work.
Yeah, you know, well, I mean, that's a tough one because I mean, the heptarchy is a really simple system. I mean, it's really simple system to use. I mean, so my Enochian, like, of course, I'm used to you know, the GD style of Enochian magic, but the past couple of months been taking a deep dive into what's called a deep purist.
Oh yeah. Like there's been a lot of material sort of like made available for that over the last few years. So that's
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
cool.
And you know, I like my pomp and ceremony. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel my most authentic when I'm doing, you know, the whole shebang, you know, the pentagram rituals, the hexagram rituals, and you know, all the stuff that probably 90% of people in the occult community would look at and be like, that's a lot of work. That's a lot of work. And I feel most authentic as an occultist. And I don't know if it's because like in the back of my head, I mean, my first book of of any occult stripe was what was it called? The Book of Witchcraft or something. I got it when I was 14. This was 1992. So
Was it Cunningham
no,
or
this was uh The Complete Book of Witchcraft by
Raymond Buckland?
no,
No?
maybe
Wait, is there
no. Okay, so it's not called The Complete Book of Witchcraft. The Practice of Witchcraft
I don't know.
by Robin Skelton.
Robin
Anyways,
Skelton. Okay.
yeah. And so this was 1992. I was 14. So like my formative years was that, Llewellyn boom of publishing just whatever
yeah, like
a writer came up with.
Right. Oh
So
God.
and part of the big thing about that era, the 70s and the 80s and the 90s was that very unhistorical we practice the old religion and what people
Yeah, we're
did
the daughters of the witches you didn't burn.
right
Never again
right
the burning times.
yeah. So I don't know if being bombarded with that false history in my formative years, I don't know if in the back of my head, like when I'm doing like a druidic ritual, I don't know if in the back of my mind I'm thinking that there's something a little inauthentic about it because I'm not doing what the druids did back then. You know what I mean? That could be the reason. It could, I don't know. It's just when I'm doing more GD full ceremonial, I feel a lot more authentic. So with that being said, that was a long explanation for me to just get to my points, which is this deep purist style Enochian I find very fascinating because it's all like, you don't spend 40 minutes in prep work doing pentagram rituals and hexagram rituals. You're praying. And these, D was Christian, and these are all very Christian prayers, which I'm fine with. I can say Jesus without, being offended.
It sounded a little sarcastic, though. You want to try again, like one more time?
No, like I'm fine with it. I'm like it doesn't bother me. Like I'm not offended as a pagan. And I mean, I guess if I really needed to, I could rewrite them slightly. I mean, like Stenwick has rewritten them to be more thelemic. So, but it's just completely out of my wheelhouse because it's just, you're sitting in front of, your table of practice and you're praying, there's not a lot of like hoopla, but there are a lot of tools involved. But I wasn't convinced that the tools were necessary for the magic, for actually contacting the angels and working with them to achieve whatever goal. There's nothing in Dee's diaries that explicitly say that. I was thinking, is it a possibility that all these tools were required for him to receive all of this information? Because he's receiving this angelic language, which we now call Enochian, which was supposedly spoken in the Garden of Eden. So maybe you need a little bit more, like, hoopla and dedication and devotion and the tools to, to show your commitment and your righteousness to receive it or whatever. So I started, and this is with a group of people, and we're all doing this, via Zoom. This is all cyber magic because we're, spread out to the four corners of the earth.
You're doing Zoom Enochian.
Yes.
Wow.
And yeah, and I'll get to cyber magic in a second.
All right. I'm here for this conversation.
Okay.
This is okay.
Because that's another interesting conversation. But we literally started with well, so we're working with the heptarchy, and we started with invoking one king and prince, and all we had were like we all drew the sigil on a piece of paper, white paper, black ink, no Enochian tools, and the results were shocking.
I have had similar experiences.
Mm.
Not with the Enochian system, but even with, because I mean the Arbitel system is super simple. It's like you sit down with a crystal and you just pray at it until you get contact, right? And it is just such a lot of those things were just so much more simple. We get I think a lot of people who look at ceremonial magic not only get influenced by the Golden Dawn stuff, but even if they start to look back, they run straight into like the Key of Solomon.
Yes.
Which is just tool overload.
Right. Yeah.
But a lot of the other grimoires, they don't necessarily have tons of tools. And if you look at like other mystical and magical systems, sometimes the tools are, like even sparser, So yeah, that's really cool that you were able to get results with such limited.
Well, look at the Abermelon operation. I mean, that's such a big operation. Whether you choose to do the 6 months or the 18 months, whatever you believe the actual translation is, it's not tool heavy, and that's a big, quote unquote, big operation, but it's not tool heavy. But yeah, no,
you pretty much just need like a giant outdoor litter box and a 6-year-old kid.
Right. So no, the results were really impressive. And so as we're continuing on though, which I found very interesting. Now, see, I'm a tool guy. Like I love my tools. So it wasn't like, oh, good, this is a system I can use without having to worry about tools. It wasn't anything like that. It was an experiment. And continuing on, at one point we got like the message like, okay, this is great what you guys are doing. You know what you're doing. It's time to step it up. Like you need to start putting in the effort and putting things together. You know what I mean? So I'm thinking that the tools are necessary, not for effective magic, but for better magic. The same way I'm going to be a better musician with a better quality guitar than a kind of like toy guitar that you can buy in Walmart's toy section. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think it's not a matter of, you need the tools to have effective magic. I think the direction we're going is we're going to need the tools to have more effective magic. And that makes me think to, like I said, there's nothing in Dee's record that says you have to have these tools for the magic. But I think it's implied. I think it's implied just because it's such a devotional practice, because, it's praying, it's humility to God and whatnot, and showing your devotion and your sort of like commitment, to the system, so yeah, it's interesting. And the fact that we're doing this, in a cyber format is doubly interesting, because 6 months ago, if you asked me about cyber magic, I would have said, well, cyber magic isn't a thing. I mean, you can do rituals. I mean, people have been doing rituals online since the 90s. But there's a big difference between doing like a celebratory Imulk ritual online and invoking a spirit in a group of people online.
So you guys are doing the invocation together over Zoom then?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool.
We've done it where we've had one operant, so just one person doing all the prayers, the orations, and all that. We've done it where we've all done the prayers and the orations, all the invocations, everything all together at the same time. And it's leading me to believe that the internet is not just a useful tool, but an actual magical tool. Because we always talk about, the web of life, everything being connected. Imagine a spider web, all the strands, la 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 la. Well, how do we describe the internet? The World Wide Web. If one form of energy is traveling through this World Wide Web, why not a different type of energy?
Yeah, I mean, why not indeed? I mean, and there's even this concept of like physical space is kind of a lie anyhow. That's so fascinating. A couple of years ago, I was involved in the chartering of a lodge belonging to the Hermetic Federation, which is a group of it's a pretty small group, but it's basically like a pretty small network of lodges of Hermetic magicians in the classical sense. We study like the Corpus Hermeticum and the various Hermetica, and we sort of like adapt stuff from that and adapt stuff from like the Greek magical papyri to do rituals together. And the group that I'm with, I mean, it's an excellent, small and amazing group of ceremonial magicians and occultists and stuff. But when the pandemic hit, we all of a sudden, we had like basically like monthly rituals we were doing together, and we tried to figure out like, how do we do this? Do we dress up in our magic robes and like do rituals over Zoom? And we never really got to that point. Instead, we got to a point where we're like, how about we just coordinate? Like, we're all going to do these at the same time, and then we'll get on Zoom afterwards and talk about it.
Okay.
Which was not satisfying. I mean, some of it was interesting. There were rituals. There were, probably like the biggest, weirdest one was the Coptic Handbook of Ritual Power, which is definitely a Jesus ritual. But doing that alone instead of together in a group is pretty strange. I hadn't really connected with the ritual very well before, but doing it on my own, it was a much more moving experience. But it's fascinating. I recently had a conversation with Heather Freeman, who ran an online Gardnerian coven.
Okay.
Doing like initiations and stuff online.
Okay.
Over like Zoom chats and stuff, which is
right.
Interesting. And she had a lot of cool stuff to say about it. Like, it's neat to see that these sorts of adaptations and things are happening, but even stranger to me is that you were able to actually get like spirit contact and that sort of stuff over Zoom.
I was surprised more than anyone because, like I said, people have been doing online rituals since the 90s. And that was back when it wasn't Zoom, you were typing.
Yeah.
And so I've spent the majority of my life as a magical practitioner, completely discounting the idea of cyber magic. Now, like I said, like doing a Sabbath ritual, like more of a celebratory ritual, that's fine. You're all together on Zoom. It's, it's the middle of pandemics. It's better than,
it's better than nothing. Yeah.
I mean, it's certainly not the same, but at least you still feel a bit of connection. And then, we sit around, we're still on Zoom after the ritual, we're drinking, we're eating, we're talking, it's very social. That's one thing. And, and I don't know if I would call that cyber magic really. So
it's a type of magic, I mean, magic is almost any ritual can be sort of
Yeah.
considered a
Yeah.
magical ritual. But so
Yeah.
I mean, it's still magic. It's just not the same. It just doesn't have the same desired outcome. You know,
Yeah.
you're offering up devotion and not necessarily like, you know, calling down a spirit.
Yeah. So it was shocking, the results, some of the results that we're getting, and the same sort of the same visions, the same messages, or the building off of, like, I was like, oh, okay, I was just told this, and then someone's like, oh, interesting, because blah blah blah, and building on that original message. And it's absolutely fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating, because there's no one more surprised than me, and pleasantly surprised, because we're a great group of people. This is my friend Fred, or RC. He started his Hermetic Mystery School.
Oh yeah, I know him.
Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah,
I was
yeah,
on
yeah.
his blog, or on his podcast.
That's right. And
like a year ago, possibly.
yeah. And so he started this Hermetic Mystery School, and um so we're together every Sunday, this group. And like I said, like, I'm in central Canada. There's someone else in Toronto, so farther east. He's in the West Coast, and then there's people all over the States. So we would never be together if we weren't doing this. And so the fact that we can work magic together, effective magic, online, is quite amazing. And but also seeing the progression of, like I said, it was almost like we were given license to start with nothing. And and now, like the spirits are like, okay, we know you guys know what you're doing, and you're dedicated enough to this, and you're taking this seriously. So the introductory free course is over. Now you got to start paying.
Yeah, well, that's so cool. That does give me hope. My Hermetic Lodge, like, the weather is starting to change. We don't have an indoor space to do ritual right now, and so we've been doing a lot of ritual, like, outdoors in the parks and stuff.
Right.
And we're sort of like running into this thing. We're like, oh man, how do we find a space, an indoor space to do ritual? Like, where are we going to go? And we were kind of lamenting, like, oh God, we don't want to have to do like that time coordination thing again. But maybe we should try to adapt some of our stuff to be online.
And I think during the pandemic, one thing that I noticed was all of these these orders, and these people that love collecting monthly dues, just shut down, basically, during we can't meet up physically. What are we gonna do?
Yeah, I mean, Freemasonry.
So what are you doing? Are you still collecting dues from your members? Why aren't you online? And even if you were so vehemently against the idea of cyber magic, do classes, do lectures, stay busy. You have an obligation to your, well, I'm just going to call them students. Like if you're
members, you can call them members. You have an obligation.
I mean, if you're in the GD, and you're working through the grades, you're a student, you're learning. You can't just, oh no, we're just no classes for 2 years. No, no big deal. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Actually, I mean, bringing this back to Freemasonry again, like Freemasonry, there's a sense of like a lodge meeting that in Freemasonry that involves like a real ritual, like sealing of a physical area. So it's it is really, really difficult, or possibly impossible, to take the experience of a lodge meeting online. So during the pandemic, lodges, of course, were all shut down. At least in the civilized states. But I don't think people in the uncivilized states listen to your podcast.
Took me a second.
We're probably okay.
Took me a second.
But a lot of lodges sort of across the country, and this was amazing. A lot of lodges across the country sort of adapted, and they're like, okay, well, we can't do lodge meetings, but we can still have like lecturers do Zoom chats. And it was amazing because all of a sudden, like I love speaking. Public speaking is something that I just really love.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
And public speaking at lodges is just an amazing experience. Getting the chance to like share, because a lot of younger people join Freemasonry looking for esoteric and occult stuff in it, and they end up being extremely disappointed because most lodges just don't explore it. Right. So when they get an opportunity to listen to somebody talk about it and be like, here's some clues you can follow on your own, or here's some things you can explore, like just the looks on their faces, the questions you get, the reactions, it's just like, oh my God, this is incredible, I want more. But having the opportunity to suddenly do like remote lectures to groups of Masons across the country, like it just wasn't happening before the pandemic.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden now it's happening all the time. Like lodges are constantly getting guest speakers from the other side of the country, the other side of the world, and it's really cool. So I think some organizations did do a good job kind of adapting and hopefully adopting new technologies that are going to be, huge help to students and members. That's my hope.
The next thing that I'm interested in is how to utilize virtual reality in ritual, and not just in ritual, because I mean, I can, put on a pair of VR goggles and I'm in a temple and I can do a ritual on my own. But, in the case like this cyber guild, we're all, together via Zoom. Well, what if now we're all together via virtual reality and we're in the same virtuality space temple, where it's the same temple and I'm looking around and there you are, there he is, there she is. And because if our
everybody's virtual reality personas.
Yeah, and if our magic is effective via Zoom, it's going to be effective in a virtual reality setting. Is it going to be more effective? I don't know. And my question to that now is I don't think that astral initiation replaces physical initiation. I think it can be a temporary fix, but you do need to eventually follow through with that physical initiation. So my theory is going to be that a VR initiation is going to be more effective than an astral initiation, but still not as effective as a physical initiation.
Okay, I have some thoughts about this.
Hold that thought for 1 second. I'm going to pause quickly. And we're back.
So I'm not sure if you knew about this because it was a few years ago, but I had a podcast before the Arneson podcast called My Alchemical Bromance.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening to the Lux Files. I'm not just the host of this podcast. I'm also the owner of Lelo Gonzalez. I make beeswax and scented spell candles, loose stick and liquid incense, anointing oils, and bath salts. So once you're done listening to this episode, why don't you head on over to my website at www.lelogonzalez.com and check out my products. For your convenience, the link to the website is also in the show notes. Yes. Yeah.
And the original theme of this podcast was going to be, I was going to get together with some occultist friends of mine who are also beer nerds, and we were going to drink fancy beer and talk about weird occult shit.
Okay.
And it never really took off. I mean, I guess there were quite a few episodes where we did drink fancy beer or talk about fancy beer, but also I got a lot of like negative reactions where people were like, I don't want to see you drinking beer or hear about the beer stuff. I just want to hear about the occult. And I realized that, like, okay, I mean, I guess it makes sense. There's not a huge amount of overlap between beer nerds and witches, I guess.
Yeah, I guess not.
Which doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, making beer is a magical act. But
yeah.
Just as a little bit of a throwback, I have I have a fancy beer here. This is a smoked stout from Solera Brewing, which is on the north side of Mount Hood. It's a beautiful, like, small town brewery way out in the middle of nowhere. I've never had this beer before, but it does have flying pigs on it, which I think is
That's cute. I love it. I love it.
So I'm just gonna like pop this open and taste it and let you guys know what it tastes like.
Absolutely. I love beer.
Me too.
I pretty much for alcohol drink beer, wine, and tequila.
I'm sort of like a beer, wine, and whiskey.
Mm.
So, ooh, it's a beautiful one. Look at it. You can't even see through it.
Oh, it's dark. Yeah.
There's not a lot of smell to it. It still smells like the glass just came out of the dishwasher, which I think is cute. Oh God, this is rich. It is smoky and dark and malty, and it's like maple and chocolate and coffee all swirled together. So
Nice.
there you go. That's my alchemical bromance throwback.
Cheers.
So back to the VR.
Mm-hmm.
So here's I was trying to think about this a little more. Like, while you were describing it, I was kind of like, okay, I have to. Like, I'm so resistant to the idea of using VR, but I'm also sort of like, when you brought up like the idea of a remote initiation, I think, okay, and this is going to get into like art of memory stuff, image magic stuff. Like, one of the things that we develop as magicians is visualization, the power to use our imagination to sort of like do our magic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is a very, very old concept in magic. During the Renaissance, there was this idea of like the phantasmal apparatus. So the imagination is like the sensory organ of the soul. So I really think that like one of the things that we do as we develop as magicians is we strengthen the phantasmal apparatus. We learn how to use it, and we learn how to like trust it, and learn like what parts of the imagination or the imaginal world are of our own creation, or what parts of the imaginal world are sort of like external things coming to us. So like an astral initiation, I think that like one of the downfalls of that is that the brand new initiate doesn't know how to use their imaginal faculty, their
Right.
phantasmal apparatus, right? Like that takes practice and training and time.
Absolutely.
So I mean, and part of the thing about that particular sense is that it is absolutely tied to the physical senses. In the Renaissance, it was thought that like the physical senses recorded physical phenomena, but your soul was unable to experience physical phenomena. So there was a part of your mind, your brain, that was responsible for translating physical phenomena into symbolic phenomena that the soul could understand.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a remote initiation in a VR setting is totally giving physical phenomena to the user. So it seems to me like that could be so my theory is, yes, I think it would also be, I also think that it would be more effective than a purely astral initiation.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you would have to also have it be an astral initiation, but the fact that you could, stimulate the senses of the initiate, I think is just incredibly important.
Well, I mean, all initiation is astral, but there's aspects to the physical initiation that you can't replicate astrally. That's why I would think that a VR initiation would be better than an astral initiation, but still not as effective or having the same effect as a physical initiation. It would be like an astral initiation is a good temporary substitute until you can, like if you're working through a grade system and you can't travel halfway across the country for your physical initiation, but you're ready to move up a grade, do your astral initiation, start your new grade work, and then when you can have the physical initiation, do the physical initiation. I'm thinking because VR is going to be more more interactive, you're going to have more of a profound effect than you would an astral, especially for true newbies who are coming to this world for the very first time, and they're going through their first, you know, like neophyte initiation or whatever, where they may not have the imaginative faculty to a degree needed for an astral initiation. What I don't want to see happen is Zoom and VR replacing, oh, well, we don't need a physical temple anymore. We don't need to actually meet up physically anymore. We have VR or we have Zoom.
Right. You don't want it to turn into like Wally World, like on the
yeah,
ship.
I mean, that would be ridiculous.
Yeah,
but,
I agree.
Yeah.
I have a thought.
Think of a VR ritual, though. It's not just it's not just feeling like you're in the same room, temple, whatever, but you know, you're doing pentagram ritual, and you're tracing the pentagrams,
oh my
and
God,
you see them in the air, and you see the circle. What about, you know, goetic magicians? They go into a VR setting where they're in the circle, there's the triangle, they're invoking a demon, and when they feel like the demon has arrived, then you know, press X button and you get a visual representation of the demon appear in the VR setting in the triangle. These are all they're not replacements, but they're enhancing the experience. You know what I mean? It's an interesting thought. It would be an interesting experiment to see how it affects your magic.
Oh, I mean, working with God forms.
Oh my God! Yeah.
There's so much. Okay, I have an idea that would enhance this even more. So, in the 19th century, there were sort of like mail order initiation type places. Some of the names that I know that we've all heard before, but I can never remember. I always get them all mixed up, like the Hermetic Brotherhood of Luxor and the Brotherhood of Light, and like all, you know, there were all these little like 3-letter acronyms running around in the 1900s. At least one of them, I read about this in Jocelyn Godwin's book, The Theosophical Enlightenment, if anybody wants to go fact check me later. But in at least one of them, they had this sort of like mail order initiation thing where they would send you like a script you're supposed to read to yourself, along with like these pills you were supposed to take, and the pills were filled with like hashish and opium. So you'd like pop some pills, get a little high, do your self initiation. But I'm not necessarily advocating that in the VR situation, but what if you did a thing where you were like, okay, we're going to do your VR initiation. We're sending you a little ritual kit. It has, you know, our temple incense, and it has a robe that you need to put on, and it has like all these things. So you have like the other senses likewise occupied.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would be, you could do something that was even more immersive than just VR. It might be, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, you would still need to be robed up. And ideally you would have,
you still need to wear the magic underpants.
Right, of course. You would, you know, ideally have the same, you know, incense going. Like there's still the real world components that are, I'll say necessary. You can say important. I'm going to say necessary, because the VR is an enhancement. It's not a replacement. You know what I mean? I would never, the idea of me being in street clothes, doing a ritual in VR because in VR I'm robed, like that. No, I would never think of something.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I'm kind of thinking like, you know, in Masonic initiations, which I don't know that I would necessarily advocate a Masonic initiation remotely in any way, but like there are certain props that you need to interact with. You know, you need to put your hand on the volume of the sacred law. You have to sort of like interact with at least Yeah, I mean, then there's all the stuff like, depending on what order you're in, if there's like secret handshakes and stuff, that's all out.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's why I'm saying like this, it could never be a true replacement of
Right.
physical initiation. It's just, I think it would be a better alternative to astral. But these are stopgap measures. These aren't replacements to true physical initiation. You look at a GD initiation and how the god forms react to the candidate. I don't know if you could have the same effect in a VR situation. I mean,
I mean, you're gonna run into limitations there.
Yeah, the officers at the other end of their VR headsets, they would do the god forms. It's not like, again, they're sitting at home in their street clothes, sitting on the sofa doing this. But I don't think you would have the same interaction. I don't see it as an equivalent. I see it as a better alternative to astral initiation, but not a replacement for physical.
Yeah, I think you're very right in that. I think there's just something about a physical initiation that you can't totally replicate in any other way.
No.
I mean, unless you can like stick somebody into the Matrix, I guess.
Right. I think back to, when I was initiated into OBOD, and not just my initiation, but the initiations that I've been a part of, and the profound effect other people's initiations had on me.
Yes. Oh man. Oh, that is such an important part of initiation. I mean, the word initiation just means beginning.
Yeah.
But when you're taking part, when you're being initiated, there's so much going on that you don't have time to absorb it. You don't necessarily, like, stuff might be happening to you, but you're not going to know. You're not, like I said before, your imaginal faculty isn't well trained. You don't know what to listen for. A lot of these rituals are so old that they're very verbose and sometimes using very, old fashioned language, and you're just not going to catch it. It's like the first time you listen to a Shakespeare soliloquy, you're not going to know what the hell's going on.
Exactly.
It's and I think that's actually one of the most beautiful things about initiations in lodge settings, is that sort of repeated exposure to the ritual, taking part in the ritual as part of the initiating team, learning the ritual more intimately. Like, it's kind of a lifelong experience. I do this thing, it's been a long time since I've it's so easy to get burned out on lodges.
Oh, of course. Absolutely.
But I mean, one of my favorite things about going to see like Masonic ritual is sitting on the sidelines and listening to somebody else give these, like, intricate degree lectures, and just thinking to myself, like, what new things am I going to pull out of it this time? And every single time, I've been a Mason for 20 years. I've probably seen, I've probably seen upwards of 100 to 150 degrees.
Right.
And every single time I see one, I get something new out of the lecture, like, almost without fail. Probably not every single time. I'm sure sometimes I probably fall asleep. Who knows?
Right.
But yeah, I totally agree. Like, there's just nothing. Yeah, there's kind of nothing like lodge work.
Yeah, I agree. Now, the reality is that the most magic you're going to do is solo. Even if you belong to a tradition or an order or whatever, I mean, 99% of your magic is solo. But that doesn't mean, or that's not to say that the lodge system or the tradition, the groups aren't important. Because they certainly are. And this also isn't saying or suggesting that people who just want to be solo, who never want to join a group, who never have, who never will, are wrong.
Oh yeah,
You
absolutely.
know,
I would not say that. I'm
no.
not even sure that I would argue that initiation by a group is necessary. You know, I mean, if you look at, you know, probably some of the like the oldest actual workable magic we have is the Greek magical papyri.
Hmm.
And there are initiatory rituals in there that you basically do to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and then, you know, you also have like the idea of, you know, like the guardian angel sort of thing, like from a Bremelin, or these sort of like systems that you work through, like in the Sworn Book of Honorius, where you have, you basically go through an initiation. The
Yeah.
true initiation is like the spirit contact that, you know, opens the floodgates for you.
Mhm.
So, you know, you don't necessarily need a group to do it. And I'm certain that there are plenty of people for whom group work just will not get them there.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, my initiation happened, but it was just like that ritual was just the start of the initiatory process. I mean,
Oh yeah.
it came to completion. I was living in Toronto at the time. It came to completion on Yonge Street, a busy, loud street in the middle of the day. Well, it was evening. Um, in a completely public setting, and it, you know, in that moment, in that one moment, my life changed forever on a
Was
sidewalk,
there
you know, like,
was there a dance involved? Like, did you break out into song?
no, no, because I literally, like, uh, my personality just completely shattered into 1,000 pieces in that
Mm-hmm.
one moment, and it took me a long time to put myself back together. It
Yeah.
wasn't a traumatic experience, but my point for bringing that up is just like the actual initiation ritual wasn't the end, it was the beginning. You know,
Yes. Oh yeah.
there's still that full process that of initiation that follows, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Um
Yeah. You know, there's that theme in the Invisibles, you know, where they talk about how initiation never ends. You know,
mhm,
once you go through the ceremony of initiation, it's something that goes on and on throughout your entire life. You
yeah,
know, and even probably backwards through time. You know, I mean, your initiation is the ritual of your initiation is a placeholder or a marker, but you know, time and space are both kind of bullshit. So that sort of opening or whatever's happening during the initiatory process is something that echoes and reverberates throughout all of it.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, 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 absolutely, absolutely. um I just had a point I was going to make, and it sounded in my head very profound, and now it's gone.
All right, cool. We're even because I had that sentence earlier
Right.
that
Yeah.
totally ran away right while I was in the middle of it.
What was I gonna what was I gonna say to that? Yeah, I
Uh,
don't know. Whatever. I don't know.
yeah, it's so like the Hermetic Lodge that I helped found, like we have not come up with an initiation ritual. It's kind of interesting. Like most of the there's it's a small group. There's like 5 or 6 of us, and most have a pretty good amount of experience with like previous magical orders or fraternal orders and stuff like that. And when we got together, we were all sort of like, we don't want to do a lodge thing. Like I know
Mhm.
we're calling ourselves a lodge, but we're not going to do the typical lodge stuff. We're not going to do the typical lodge initiation because I think there's a danger with ritual that's kind of like set in stone. You know, that people, you know, do over and over and over again, where it becomes like, you know, rote memorization and just, you know, people doing the parts but not like feeling the parts or being
Mhm.
the parts. And it also turns into, I think sometimes there's this danger of, you know, like if you got like a multiple degree system where you can like rise through the ranks, there's not always like a way to verify that somebody has achieved the level of initiation that they need in order to get to the next rank. So you end up having, you know, over time, I think orders kind of start to get some hollow spots in their ability to like really properly initiate.
Yeah.
So we talked about that, and we talked about sort of like issues that we'd run into before in other orders we'd been in, and we're kind of like, okay, well, our approach is going to be this instead. We're not going to have a leader. We're going to operate by consensus, which is awesome. And then the other thing we're going to do, we're going to be like, well, you know, we're going to look through the PGM. We're going to find initiatory rituals out of there that are all solo initiations. And we're going to be like, if anybody in the group wants to do one of these, the rest of us will act as your sort of like, you know, babysitters.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so if you want to, I don't know, hang upside down from the world ash and, you know, gouge out your eye and give it to Emir or whatever, we'll hang out and make sure you don't bleed to death.
The PGM is fascinating.
It is. I'm sorry that I just mixed all of the Norse stuff into the PGM talk, but you know,
it's all good. It's syncretic.
Yeah.
It's what we do. But yeah, the PGM is fantastic. When I was a teenager, you know, getting into magic and whatnot, I kind of had the idea that everything in the local metaphysical shop was all necessary, you know, and everything was tied, you know, witchcraft and UFOs and you know, everything, every subject that you find in a metaphysical shop was all, you know, together, and you had to, you know, you had to be into everything.
Yeah, you had to catch them all.
Yeah, and so seeing references to the PGM in, you know, some Wiccan books, references to the Golden Dawn. So as a teenager, you know, I bought the PGM. I bought all these books on the Golden Dawn. I bought 777, and you know, you just open them up and like, okay, I know that this is English, but I have no idea what it's saying. And the PGM was one of those books. I bought it because I thought that I had to buy it because there was enough books that I bought that referenced the PGM. So I bought it, and you know, as like a say 16-year-old, and it's still sitting on my shelf. Like, I mean, I don't get rid of books. So
I think you can see I have that problem too.
Yeah. But you know, opening up now, just like, you know, when I was in my mid-20s and I cracked open the Golden Dawn books for the first time in a decade, and I was like, oh, I get this reference, and I understand what this means, and blah 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 blah. I can read this. I can, you know, I can actually get into, you know, the Golden Dawn system of magic and make this work for me. And yeah, so it's interesting, you know, looking through the PGM now and being able to kind of, you know, make sense of it, where, you know, when I first got it, it's like, oh, okay, well, I don't know what this is, so I'm just gonna, you know, put it on the shelf and, you know, pack it up with all of my multiple moves, packing up my books, and yet never crack it open in 25 years or whatever.
It's the third of the necessary big black bricks, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about the PGM is it's so packed full of stuff.
Yeah.
But it's also just amazing that you can just open it up to a random page and look at a spell and be like, oh, I could do that. Or you'll open it up to another page and you're like, you need a mummified falcon and like goat milk and the urine of your worst enemy, and you have to do all this. And I'm like, well, I don't know how to get any of those things.
Right.
But I just love it. Like the barbarous names in the PGM are probably like, if there are people out there who haven't tried PGM magic, like just find an easy PGM spell that has a lot of cool stuff to chant and learn how to chant barbarous names, and it'll be a life-changing experience. You will fall in love. I promise you, internet.
Yeah.
Or your money back.
There you go. Yeah, well, I mean, you know, there's something to the barbarous names, and of course, you know, chanting and putting yourself into that aesthetic state. So you can really, do the magic. And the idea of the barbarous names, like right now, like I was saying, like with the deep purist Enochian, we're doing it through prayer, and they're very long prayers and invocations and whatnot. In the PGM, you have a lot of like the barbarous names, and in other grimoires, you have like the barbarous names, and they don't mean anything, but they're, it's a focus, and it just gets you into that right spot where everything changes, and your magic is just so much different than what it was when tried that spell from that little spell book.
Oh yeah, like your first candle magic spell.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It is
Highly
kind of funny.
recommend.
Yeah. It is funny though, thinking back and looking at how much your practice changes over decades. Of occult stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I've been doing magic now more in my life than not, because like I said, I picked up my first book when I was 14, and I am now 42. So I don't, what's that, 14, 24, 34, 26, 20, 28 years, and obviously, in that time period. Well, and I mean, those first years, those formative years as a teenager, they count, but that's such a learning process because you're starting from absolute scratch. When I started getting back into, or when I started getting into Golden Dawn stuff in my mid-20s, that was after, over a decade of experience with magic, so that's different.
Right.
That's different.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
still,
my experience is kind of the same. I mean, I was probably around the same age when I got my first witchcraft book, and I'm sure I acted out some of the spells in there, and I mean, I didn't know what I was doing. I doubt that they ever had any effect or did anything interesting. But yeah, it is kind of funny to look back and see all that.
I don't like it. It's not, I mean, because when you're a teenager, you do stupid stuff anyway. So like that's what the teenage years are for. So I look back at some of the stuff that I did back then, and it's kind of cringe. But
at least you weren't on Twitter.
Right. Well, yeah, exactly. Oh God, I couldn't imagine me as a teenager with access to social media. I think that would be a recipe. Oh, I know that would be a recipe for disaster.
I have part of my origin story that I didn't tell you.
Oh,
are you ready? This is good stuff. This is spicy. Okay, so back in the day, before the internet was widely available, I'm a computer nerd, and I've been a computer nerd like my entire life, right? But I'm sure you probably encountered BBSs when you were younger. Yeah. They were basically like, they were computers that you could dial into with a modem, and it would be like one person at a time, and you could leave messages for each other and play little games and do all that kind of stuff. Play like BBS games. But there were also these. They called them. There was this network called FidoNet, and which was basically. Oh God, I can't remember what they called. Was it called a packet switch network? I can't remember what it was, but basically all of these BBSs around the world would dial into each other late at night and exchange packets of messages to make like, to enable sort of like the equivalent of like big discussion groups and bulletin board groups that sort of spanned like the whole world.
Mm-hmm.
And FidoNet was the largest one of these networks, and it was big and had tons and tons of topics, but there were also more specialized networks, and one of them was PodsNet, the Pagan Occult Distribution System Network.
Okay.
And I ran a BBS off of a computer. I mean, I must have started in 89 or 90 maybe. Like I ran it for a good number of years, and I was basically like the Podsnet node in my area.
Okay.
So I got exposed to all of these like different discussion groups very early on, filled with like occultists and pagans and stuff, and had access to all of this stuff to read and sort of play with. And of course I was on there like arguing and being like, I was totally a cringy teenage witch.
Right.
You know, it was I'm not going to I don't know if those archives are available, so I'm not going to tell anybody what my handle was or anything like that. But yeah, I was on Podsnet. I was on Alt Magic and Alt Discordianism or whatever on Usenet later on. Like, you know, before social media was a thing, there were still plenty of places for the you know, socially inept to go online and be like cringy,
right,
witchy edgelord types.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'm really glad that none of that is just available for people to search now.
I know, right? Gosh, yeah. No, I think yeah, I'm so glad as a teenager, even like in my 20s, that social media wasn't a thing, because I don't know if I would have avoided prison otherwise. So, you know,
Yeah.
I think it's just, yeah, my good reputation is intact because there's no evidence of
There
any.
was I remember that there was a local, so I mean, you know, when you had your BBS, it was all locals who would dial in. So there were, you know, like 5 pagans in my town who would dial in, and everybody else was, you know, if you were a BBS user, you dialed into every BBS and played the same game on every BBS and talked to the same people in every BBS in a small town. And there were some like really hardcore Christians who would get on to like just argue about religion and like yell at you about coming to Jesus and stuff. And so I got into like religious arguments with one guy in particular who was he was much older than me. He was a local. He owned, I think, like a Taco Bell or something like that, or maybe a couple of Taco Bells. But out of all of these arguments, he would always be like, hey, come by the Taco Bell, get some free food, and et cetera, et cetera. And so I'd go by Taco Bell, and like he'd yell at me about Jesus through the drive-through window, and I'd yell at him about paganism through the drive-through window, and I'd get free tacos. And then once I went through and he knew it was my birthday or something, and he's like, oh, I got you a Bible. So I still have that Bible. He gave me a Bible for my birthday.
Oh, wow.
I never found Jesus.
I can't,
except in the index.
I can't think of anything more unchristian than owning Taco Bells.
It is sort of breaking every single commandment, I'm pretty sure. Man, that was a long time ago. I hadn't thought about that in a really long time.
Jesus says you can't stop stirring the meat. You got to stir the meat or you're going to hell.
I mean, in a way, it is sort of like feeding the needy and the hungry. You know, I mean, Taco Bell food is awfully cheap.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
maybe there is a hint of Christian charity in owning a Taco Bell. No.
That's funny. Lord.
Yeah.
Christians, don't come at me. I was just joking.
Oh, no, he wasn't. Yeah, those were the old days for sure.
I think you could only be a good Christian if you, in the fast food industry, if you owned a Chick-fil-A.
No, I think you can be a good Christian if you own a Jack in the Box.
Well, that's true, because Jack in the Box kills everyone with food poisoning, so that sounds very Christian.
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole part of the apocalypse, isn't it? Like
Yeah.
Jack in the Box. But also Jack in the Box is very multicultural, right? You can get tacos and hamburgers there.
You know what I miss living in Texas? I miss Whataburger. Their
I do not know what
hamburgers
that is.
are their hamburgers are so good. It's Whataburger is like, in the South, they're not spread out
Okay.
all over the States. I mean, I don't know how if they're Eastern Seaboard. I don't think they're like Northwest or Northeastern state. I know it's more of a Southern thing, but Whataburger's really good. Their hamburgers are amazing. Their shakes are really good. I really do miss Whataburger a lot. A lot, a lot.
I'm not really a big fast food guy. So I actually don't even know the last time I went to a Jack in the Box. It's been at least 15 years probably. But
I've never been to a Jack in the Box because we don't have Jack in the Box in Canada. And literally the only thing I knew about Jack in the Box was that everyone dies. Because there's always like food poisoning. So when I moved to
yeah,
when I moved
death
to
comes for us
Texas,
all.
when I moved to Texas, I never went to, well, see, but I've never, I'm not a fast food person, but I was introduced, oh, you got to come, because I was the Canadian. I'm new
Mhm.
to not only the States, but to Texas. And
Wait, so you started in Canada and then moved to Texas and then went back to Canada?
yeah, so I moved
Oh, I
down
don't think
there.
I knew that. I thought you started in Texas and then moved to Canada.
No, 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 no. I'm Canadian. And
Okay.
the company that I was working for transferred me to Texas. And then when I moved, oh God, when did I move back here? 2012, I moved back here to Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I was 34 years old. And that's when I decided I would stop working. And
Working is bullshit.
yeah, it really is. And then I decided to start Lalo Gonzalez. So yeah, but
Which now is working, isn't it? I see you post on Twitter saying things like, "Oh my God, I've got 7,000 candles to put into boxes."
I don't regret it. Because I love making the products and I love the customers and I love everything about it.
It's impressive to see that because I mean, I feel like when we first followed each other on Twitter, you were still kind of like getting started. And it was just like a year or two later when all of a sudden you were so overwhelmed that you were tweeting about it.
Yes,
which is awesome.
yeah, because when I first got on Twitter, I had my first two distributors at that time, but that was still kind of new. So, that whole business was building. I mean, I have sales in a month now, not every month, but I have sales last year and this year that I can have sales in a month that are the same as I did in all of 2017 or all of 2000, and you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
That's really impressive.
Yeah, like when I first got on Twitter and you and I first started following each other. So like that year, I can do that amount of sales in 1 month. So it's exploded. It just took time because, like I said, like I had the two distributors, like my Canadian distributor, my American distributor at that point. But it takes time for stores to, buy the product and customers to buy the product from the stores and, the demand and blah, 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 blah. Then I got my Australian distributor. And so, talking about the Enochian that we're doing, the cyber magic.
Right.
The first Enochian working that we did with that, black sigil on white paper, that was it. No tools or nothing. I was like, oh, because we were, going to scry and find out like what colors should the sigil be. And by the way, we all got the same colors.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And then optionally we were like, if you want to ask them for something, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh, I should ask them just to give me like a little boost in business, like an extra order from the distributor this month. I'm like, oh, you know what? No, I'm not going to bother. You know, like
So
no,
did you though?
no,
No.
no, technically. So while we were invoking Kamar and Haganel, so that all happened. Then we finished up. We all logged off. I did my banishings, blah, 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 blah. Went up to eat something. Then I got on my computer to check my email. While we were invoking Kamar and Haganel, I get an email. It's this woman. She's like, oh, I'm from such and such company. We are interested in talking with you about being your exclusive distributor for China and Hong Kong.
That is badass.
Yeah. So now I have a distributor for China and Hong Kong. So
you're gonna need to like hire some munchkins or something,
right? And I do this all these products. Like last year, I made 17,000 or 18,000 products. I do it all here. Like I'm sitting in my ritual room right now. I do it all here in my ritual room.
That's amazing.
Planetary days and hours, like I take all that into consideration and whatnot. And it's gotten big for something that I do in like a ritual room. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I've only gotten a little bit of your stuff. I got some of your Kefi incense, and I got a first lunar the first lunar talisman.
Right.
What are the pentacle? The first pentacle of the moon from the Solomon. But it's great stuff. I am totally happy that you're succeeding. I will order more stuff from you at some point as soon as I stop spending money on other stupid things.
Right.
Not that your stuff is stupid. I didn't mean to imply that.
No,
I don't feel like I'm spending money on stupid things. It's just I just got the Paul Summers Young translation of Agrippa.
Well, yeah, that sounds stupid.
Well, it was a stupid amount of money. Like it's so expensive. And then after I'd gotten it, Eric Purdue found out that I had it and was asking me questions about it. And Eric Purdue is doing a translation of Agrippa that's coming out in November. And he lives in Seattle, and we've met, and we're sort of like acquaintances and internet friends. And the minute he started asking me about it, I just had this like feeling. I was like, oh man, I have to get his translation too. I can't not get his translation. Like, that would be such an asshole move. Like, so now I'm that's a lot of my esoteric budget for books.
I love books. I love books. I probably could order, well, it's hard to say, I could order less books than I do.
I mean, could you, or are you bound by destiny?
I think I have a moral obligation to uphold the economy with my book buying.
Yeah, and to support occult authors and other authors. Yes,
yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. I totally agree with you.
What pisses me off, though,
you cannot stop.
Right. What pisses me off, though, and I mean, when a book is out of print and it becomes rare and rare to get, of course, it's going to have more money. I get that. It makes sense. That's just the way, that's just the way it is. What pisses me off, though, is that people should recognize that I'm different. And when I'm like, hey, I actually want this book, the price, like, not even you be like, oh, yeah, I'll drop the price for you. Like, the website should know that.
So you basically think that there should be some sort of universal discount code that you have and nobody else.
Yes.
I mean, now that is a test of your Enochian powers.
Right. That sounds
right there. I feel like
I like that, a universal discount code. I think that sounds very sexy.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm
Haganel, listen up. Get on it. Don't make me put on my Pele ring.
It is funny though. Money magic seems to be kind of like the easiest kind sometimes.
Yeah. You know, I don't do a lot of practical magic, and
I
maybe
don't
I
either.
should. I've always found that, you know, because I have a pretty good daily practice that I do religiously. Um, and I, I I feel like, you know, I don't know, like my clergy provides exactly what I need, when I
Hmm.
need it, how I need it. Um, you know, um,
Yeah.
so I don't do a lot of practical magic.
Yeah, I don't either. I mean, sometimes it's really hard to figure out where the line exists
Mm,
between like, you know, the thaumaturgy, the practical magic, and the theurgy, you know, the sort of like spiritual, mystical side of magic. But and I think a big part of it is like for me, you know, you were talking about your moment of initiation where it sort of like hit you in the street and it was sort of like, oh God, everything's changed and stuff. For me, it also was in sort of like a mundane setting where um, a big part of my change was sort of this thing where I was I'm not being responsible by making money. You know, I
mm,
was in the tech industry and I was pulling in more money than I needed and I wasn't using it responsibly. I wasn't being ethical about the entire thing. Like I wasn't being a good human, you
right.
know. And I should have been. Like I should have realized it earlier, but you know, self-awareness is ferociously difficult. It's possibly harder than not buying books,
Yeah.
although who knows.
Yeah.
Um, but eh, like one of the things that really kind of happened was I just had to walk away from jobs, you know, and it was a long process. Like I did walk away from like really big job. I walked away from like the really high paying stuff and I still end up, you know, I mean, now I'm a freelancer, so I mean, there's always work. You always have to pay rent and do that kind
Yeah.
of shit. But
Yeah.
like, I do not have a job either,
Hmm.
except I guess making podcasts.
Right.
but but after that, it always was easy to kind of like stumble into money when I needed it, or to like do money magic or something. It never really, yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe I shouldn't talk about it that way. Maybe I'm, you know, ruining it, uh, but yeah, I don't do a whole lot of practical magic either. Although there are just things that you kind of like discover in some of the grimoires and some of the techniques that are, I don't know if they count as practical magic or what the hell they are, but I'm not even really comfortable like talking about them on podcasts and talking about it in public. But I would encourage people to read um, the last dozen chapters of book one of Agrippa and look at some of the weird shit he talks about
Mm,
and think carefully about what he's saying. It bears close reading,
yeah. Yeah.
but because magic is really weird, it turns out.
That's a bit of an understatement.
Yeah, yeah. We're talking about chanting into Zoom meetings and talking to spirits and all that kind of stuff. That's
Right.
not the weird part.
Yeah. 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 Um, who was I saying? Oh, I think I was having this conversation of you just the word weird. I think maybe, yeah, no, it was my last podcast episode with Edward Reed, Frater BT, where it's talking about like how, like, you know, magic isn't weird. We look weird doing it.
Okay, that's
And
yeah. I mean, it can't be weird because it's part of how the cosmos works.
yeah, yeah,
Like it's basically the definition of not weird. It's just people don't really know about it.
yeah. But we look weird doing it. And I mean, I'm okay with that. I would rather people think I was ridiculous than dangerous. You know,
Oh,
like I don't need another satanic panic going on.
Oh yeah,
where I
me
mean,
neither.
where I'm, the dangerous, uh, magician getting his powers from the devil. I'd rather be ridiculous and people laugh at me, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I completely agree with you.
Yeah,
You'd rather be the fool than the magician, at least from the
absolutely.
outside. Yeah.
On the out, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Don't take me seriously. Think I'm crazy. Perfect. Great. Good. Good. When you're marching down the street with your pitchforks and torches, you can pass by my house because I'm just
Yeah,
that
I'm just that
crazy,
weird dude with a funny mustache.
right? Right? You know?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
So,
Yeah, I live in an apartment complex in Portland. Portland is a fascinating city because of just the abundance of occultists and witches and tarot readers and astrologers and like
mhm.
and it's also, it's super like LGBTQ friendly, and it's just sort of like you cannot be the weirdest person in a room in Portland.
Yeah.
um Especially if you're hanging out with Katie Montana Jordan, because she's usually the weirdest person in the room. I hope that she's out there listening to this right now. But it's just beautiful because there are so many communities in Portland that are just super accepting.
Hmm.
So it's easy to not be the weird person. And I was just thinking about, like, even in my apartment complex, like if you're looking at me right now, like to my right, there's like a young teenage witch living there who's constantly doing like weird witch rituals. Two doors down to my left, there's a uh, some Buddhist guy who does his like Buddhist mantra chanting every day. And if I can open my windows and I can sort of listen to him doing his like droning chants and his bell ringing and all that kind of stuff. And it's just like it's everywhere in town. There's just weirdos and occultists and witches and stuff just like popping out of the woodwork. So I'll totally be safe. If there's a satanic panic, they have so many people to pitchfork before they get to me.
Right. What is it about the Northwest there? Because
It's
like,
not the whole Northwest. Most of it, like if you leave the cities, it gets conservative and Christian and kind of scary pretty fast.
yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, most of the, like I can, in Oregon, Portland, Eugene, and Ashland are all pretty like open-minded, like religiously liberal and usually politically liberal sort of places that really are very open and accepting of alternative religions and
Yeah. So
fringe
I have
beliefs.
a lot of customers because I don't just sell to distributors.
Hmm.
Like I have my online, like my website that people can order online. And the amount of people um that are that order from me that are in like the Portland area or the Seattle area, like it's astounding, if I were to, like list, by how many, customers
Hmm.
per region, like California and Washington
Which both
would,
have a lot of people. Oregon doesn't have a whole lot of people in it.
um, well, California and Washington would be up at the top.
Hmm.
Oregon would probably be third or
Wow.
fourth. Yeah, yeah, yeah. For the amount
Hmm.
of customers that I have. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Wow.
And
Well, I
they're the
assume
best
that's
customers. Like
probably that's
they're
got to
the
be my influence, right? Like I
probably,
probably, I just
probably.
talk about you all the time, and
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um and it's interesting too because the Washington and Oregon customers also are the most loyal, like
right.
constantly repeat purchasing. You know what I
Uh-huh.
mean?
Hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, you guys have weirdos all over the place there.
It's great. It took me, I mean, I think I started doing professional tarot reading in Portland probably in like 2013 or 2014.
Okay.
And I never really did anything to kind of like reach out and connect with the community until God, probably like 2018. And it was just amazing. It was incredible. There are I went to this event where it was a panel of tarot deck creators talking about like the process of creating tarot decks and getting them published and all that kind of stuff. And there were like 5 people on the panel, 5 tarot deck creators who were all just sort of Portland locals, who were all like super tarot expert wizard nerds, who had either published decks or in the process of doing it. And the room that they were in was packed. Like,
Wow.
they totally sold the whole room out. Like, there
Right.
were like 30 people in there, all people who were, you know, various levels of like tarot reading proficiency.
Right.
And I see it in all sorts of stuff, you know, like I've taught, you know, before the pandemic hit, I was doing some in-person classes at this little occult shop in Portland. And, you know, if I picked the right topic, the class would sell out instantly. They'd be like, we only have room for 10 people. And you know, the lady who ran the shop had posted on her website, and then like the next day she'd be like, oh yeah, it's filled.
It's awesome though.
And it was just kind of amazing. And and also like for many years I've been doing this thing that I call a PDX occult brunch, where I, you know, invite Freemasons and occultists and stuff, and we meet up for brunch and talk about weird shit, and we do sort of a show and tell. You know, people bring their new books or their new tarot decks and be like, oh, look what I got.
Nice.
And it was pretty good. You know, there were times where I was regularly getting like 10 or 15 people showing up for brunch, just sort of casual. And it was early. It was 10 o'clock on a Saturday. Who the hell wants to go have brunch at 10 o'clock on the Saturday,
Right.
except for like really old men?
Yeah.
But it was pretty good. And even after the pandemic hit, I started doing it over Zoom. And still, we'd get like this great collection of like weirdos and occultists showing up on Zoom to like all eat brunch remotely together, which is creepy. I would have to say, like, it was okay because the pandemic was happening, but in normal reality, it is not normal to sit and stare at your computer screen and see 10 people eating.
Right. Yeah.
I'm sure there are people who are way into that, and I'm happy for them. But for me, it was just sort of like, I don't want to listen to this.
Yeah.
Everybody's making their eating noises, and I'm literally just looking at people eat.
Yeah, not into that. Into that. I'm not a foodie, so that, you know, that nothing about that excites me at all. Yeah.
Well, you know, I don't think, do they do brunch in Canada? Is that a thing that you guys have up there?
Yeah, it's legal. Yeah, it's legal.
Okay, cool. Yep. All right. I was just making sure. I know that in some countries it's not.
Yeah, I don't participate. Like, I'm not, no, like,
no brunch.
You want to do brunch? Yeah, I'll see you at 4. Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, I respect your practices.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, I'm not going to do it that way, but I respect it.
I mean, now the only redeeming quality that brunch has is alcohol before noon. So,
I mean, have you ever had a mimosa?
Yeah.
There's this drink. I just tried this. This is apparently a very popular brunch drink called a Caesar, and it's sort of like a wimpy Bloody Mary.
Yeah, I know what a Caesar is because my mother likes Caesars, and they're more popular in Canada than Bloody Marys are.
It's the other way around down here.
Yeah, so I've heard people say that it's like a Caesar is a Canadian thing. I don't know if it's Canadian. I just know that
I think I've heard that here too. I've heard that.
Yeah, I just, at least if it's not Canadian, I know they're more popular here than Bloody Marys. Yeah.
Is it true that poutine is Canadian? Like, do you guys actually eat that stuff a lot?
Okay, so poutine is Canadian. It originates in Quebec, which is our French province.
You mean Quebec?
Quebec, which is our French province. And poutine is so disgusting. French fries.
Oh, I love poutine.
Melted cheese and gravy.
Yeah.
You can't get more disgusting than that. But you can, because now you know, there's like poutine food trucks that, you know, the combinations like of the stuff that they add, I mean, it's just absolutely repulsive. It's
well,
just
we've got some pretty good poutine in Oregon. So I don't know, maybe the poutine's just worse in Canada.
It's just the idea of French fries with cheese with gravy is I just, oh, and the
What about,
smell of
okay,
it.
hold on. What about just French fries with cheese?
No,
What?
no,
Why
I'm,
not?
I'm,
What?
no,
What about a baked potato with cheese? Are
no,
you against cheese and potatoes in general?
yes.
That is so weird. I'm sorry. That's just like scalloped potatoes.
Ugh. Oh,
Oh,
that's, oh God, oh no, they look gross, they smell gross. No,
no, no. They're
mm,
okay. Look, this
um,
podcast is over.
yeah, potatoes and salsa.
Potatoes and
Yeah,
salsa.
baked potatoes with salsa.
Okay,
Um,
and sour
that,
cream, right?
no,
No sour cream. Like, there's no
no,
dairy in your potato world. What
no.
about mashed potatoes?
Yes,
But there's tons of dairy in mashed potatoes,
yes. There's milk and there's butter, and it's all
and
mixed
sometimes there's
in.
sour cream, and it's
And
also
no, no sour cream.
there's
What's wrong
sour
with
cream
you?
in mashed potatoes.
Oh, you're pissing me off. Um, when I moved to, today is Canadian Thanksgiving.
Oh, today is Indigenous Peoples Day down here.
Yeah, and we don't make as big a deal of Thanksgiving than that Americans do.
Uh-huh.
Um, so it was never a big deal. You know, we always have turkey dinner, but it was never a big deal. It became my favorite holiday when I moved to Texas
Oh
because
man.
it's bigger than Christmas.
Hmm.
And you know, the fall colors and it's perfect. It's perfect. And yeah, so yeah, you guys like sour cream and I don't get it. One thing, so I like sweet potatoes until they're mashed, and that's
Hmm.
just weird. And mashed sweet potatoes with whipped marshmallows.
Oh
Oh,
God. Yeah, I'm not a really big fan of that. That's pretty gross.
yeah, yeah.
So we can
But
at least come together on that. And also, I do think I love American Thanksgiving. That it is
it
the
is
best holiday.
fantastic.
The
It really is.
feasting, the
Yeah.
bringing together of people. Like my parents, my parents moved out to Oregon in like the early mid 70s from Minnesota, and sort of like left all of their big, Midwestern families behind and came out
Mhm.
here, and have been doing sort of like a what I guess what kids these days would call a friendsgiving, where they didn't really have like a family get together as much as they had like all of their friends get together who didn't have like families to join up with. And they've been doing it with the same group of friends for since the 70s. So
Yeah.
it's this, and their group of friends are all old and have kids, most of whom are my age, and all of their kids have kids. So there's like it's this huge extended friendsgiving family feast thing that's been going on for years, and it grows and shrinks in size. But at its biggest, it would like reach to like 40 some people who would
Oh
all
my
get together,
God.
and it's just always an incredible experience.
Yeah,
Just so
yeah,
much food, and just legendary amounts of like drinking and eating and
yeah.
singing and you know
Yeah.
howling at the moon and that sort of
Yeah.
stuff.
And see, like we couldn't have Thanksgiving when you guys have it because by that point, you know, all the pretty fall colors are gone and there's snow and it's just dreary and blah. So our Thanksgiving is, you know, middle of October and the trees are beautiful and they're all red
Hmm.
and orange and yellow and it's gorgeous and um you know, it's cool, but right now it's really mild so far. Um but yeah, it was nice because American Thanksgiving is around my birthday and
Oh.
down in Texas, not so much Houston because Houston is so much more like subtropical where
Hmm.
there's not a lot of color change. But in Austin, and I always spent Thanksgiving in Austin because my friend Brian, who lived there, loves cooking, loves doing a big, even if it was just the two of us,
Hmm.
a big, huge Thanksgiving dinner. And so in Austin, there's more of the color change. And yeah, it's the perfect time of year because the colors are perfect, the weather's nice, and um yeah, some pretty awesome food, except for mashed sweet potatoes with whipped marshmallows, which was just
Yeah, that's just gross.
that's yeah. And I hate pumpkin pie. So
I mean, oh, Jesus, I don't know what to say about that. I just don't know what to say about that.
Yeah. So.
Okay. I can't, you can't really question another person's taste buds. You don't ever have the luxury of experiencing another person's like sensory organs. So I don't know how pumpkin pie interacts with your mouth parts or whatever, but it sounds like something alien when they say they don't like pumpkin pie.
I mean, I just go off the premise that I'm right.
Okay, that's cool. I will also go off the premise that I'm right, and I feel like there's a good 1,500 miles between us. Maybe rightness is location dependent.
So the more northeast you go, the righter you become. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
No, I'm like rightness can be local, so I can be locally correct, and you can be locally correct, but maybe those spheres of correctness just.
So does that mean if you come to Thunder Bay, you'll hate pumpkin pie while you're here?
I don't know. I have to say.
What about gingerbread?
I mean, yeah, I'm cool with gingerbread. Gingerbread's great. What?
Bad connection. Bad connection. Click.
I mean, I would visit Thunder Bay just for the name. That's a cool name.
It's nice up here. Like, to be honest, it's nice. I mean, there's just green everywhere, and the north part of the city is terraced. As Lake Superior, shrunk in depth. So it's terraced. Where I am in the southern part of the city, it's flat. When you travel to the border, to the American border, US-Canadian border, you're traveling through a wide valley, and the mountains are all mesas, as opposed to like jagged, continental shift mountains.
Right,
They're all like water eroded, mesas. Not as dramatic as like Texas, but and rolling farm land, and then the mountains on either side, and it's so beautiful. It's just winters are brutal here, because they're just brutal. It's cold, there's a lot of snow.
You're far north, and you're in that part of the world where the winters are rough. I mean, enjoy it while it lasts, I would say, because everything might just keep heating up. You might just
this last winter was so mild. This is one thing that I had to explain to everyone in Texas about plugging in our cars, because we have we have block heaters to keep the engines warm so they don't freeze overnight and you can't turn them on. So this last winter, it was so mild. It's not unusual. I mean, it's pretty normal for it to be minus 20 degrees Celsius here in the middle of winter. Not for months on end, but we barely hit that throughout the entire winter. We didn't get a lot of snow, and so I like that, except for the fact that the reason why our winters are getting milder. But the thing is that we get the same amount of precipitation every year,
no matter what. Right.
Yeah.
So you got rain instead of snow.
Whether it comes in snow or rain. So we got very little snow last winter. So the spring was really, really rainy. And then the summer, no rain, above average heat. Like half my grass turned yellow. And so we had a really, really, really rainy spring and first part of summer, because we're still going to get that precipitation. It just didn't come in snow.
Oh man, it's been really weird in Oregon the last year too. We've had a lot of like extreme weather events. In February, we had a really, really like surprisingly brutal freeze, which never really happens here. And then the whole state is like experiencing drought conditions.
Yeah.
We just
Yeah.
haven't been getting very much rain. And then we had that shitty heat wave. You know, I mean, the heat wave like started down here and it moved up through Canada. You guys, there were towns in Canada that got it just as bad as you.
There was a town in British Columbia.
That like burned to the ground.
Well, first of all, 2 days before it burned to the ground, it set a like Canada-wide heat
Yeah.
record.
Yeah.
For
I don't know what it
temperature.
was in Celsius, but I think they hit like 120 degrees Fahrenheit.
It was 50. Oh, no, that can't be right. I can't remember.
Yeah, it was definitely over
50.
50.
Yeah, I can't remember. It was really hot though. And then
brutal.
2 days later, it burned to the ground. But that
Mhm.
heat wave in just Vancouver, the city of Vancouver alone in Canada, not Vancouver, Washington, killed like 700 or 900 people.
Yeah, it was bad.
Yeah, air conditioners up here aren't standard.
So yeah, same here in Portland. Like I got an air conditioner this year.
Yeah.
I named it Calvin Coolidge.
And our buildings are designed to trap in heat.
Of
So
course.
you have all these buildings that are designed to trap in heat and don't have air conditioning. So yeah, you can't be surprised with temperatures like that you have 700, or like I said, it was either 700 or 900, somewhere around there, people dying just from the heat in one city.
Yeah.
It was pretty crazy. And then all of the fires, and like I said, like Lytton or Lytton, it's pronounced Lytton. You know, they set this crazy temperature record, and then 2 days later, it just doesn't exist anymore because every single building is gone to the ground. You know.
Yeah, it's weird. You know, we have ended up living in very interesting times.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, the thing is that every generation, though, sees things going on in the world. Oh, this is it. This is it. This is the end times. I mean,
It's true. It's just like every generation, you know, you can see throughout history, every generation complains about the generations that come after them.
Of course. Yeah. Of course. You know, the thing.
Although our generation definitely, like, we were lazy. We definitely deserve the complaints. Gen Xers.
Yeah, ish. Yeah. I mean, but the thing too now is that with social media and 24-hour news, like we're seeing all the shit going on in every part of the planet. Whereas, you know, 50 years ago, that wasn't a thing. And,
right.
you know, 100 years ago, you found out about something major months later. You know what I mean? But every generation thinks, oh, this is the end times. This is the end times. Like, well, chop then, you know, like get on with it. If this is the end times, then, you know, move it along.
Then bring it on.
You know.
Well, yeah. I'm not really sure if end times is even a real thing.
It isn't.
But I do feel like I am getting a little worn out. I do need to, we should probably, maybe we can find a way to bring this around to a happy occult finish.
This is the end times of episode 29, but not of the planet.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hopefully. We hope.
Okay, so let's bring it around to a happy finish.
Okay.
Or a happy. Let's do a happy ending.
Happy end.
Yeah. So
join us for part 2 on OnlyFans.
That's going to be behind a paywall.
Right.
Okay, so how about you tell everybody where they can find you online? All of this I'll put into the show notes so everyone can just easily click, but tell everyone where they can find you online. And do you have anything exciting that you're going to be doing in the near future?
Yeah, all right. Well, I have a website, arnemancy.com. And I'm also Arnemancy on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. I'm probably most active on Twitter. I try to be active on Instagram, but man, it's just exhausting. And I have, the Arnemancy podcast, which has I've just started season 3, and it's going really, really well. And I do have a special event coming up the Friday before Halloween, so October 29th. I'm going to be doing a live stream on YouTube with a occultist bartender, and we're going to be talking about occult themed cocktails.
Nice.
Talk about their sort of like magical correspondences and stuff like that, and then we'll taste the cocktails. It'll be remote, so I might be making cocktails myself. We haven't really figured out all the details how it's going to work, but
okay.
I think it'll be fun. And yeah, for details on that, you'll just have to follow me on social media. I will announce it in all of those places once we figure out what we're doing.
Yeah, that sounds like fun.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it should be fun. Awesome. Yeah, and aside from that, I don't know that I have anything else super special happening, but check out the Arnemancy blog and the podcast. I've got a lot of articles going back to 2014, and lots of stuff about Hermeticism and tarot and magic and the occult. Sometimes other weird projects I'm working on and stuff like that.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Excellent. And sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying thank you.
Oh, thank you. No, thank you. Absolutely. This has been a really, really, really good episode. So I'm really happy we did this.
I have really enjoyed it. We've talked a little bit on social media before, and I've ordered some stuff from your shop, and you've always seemed like a really interesting person from a distance. So I'm glad we got a chance to dig in.
Yeah. Thank you. It was great. And for the listeners, like I said, all of Erik's links are going to be in the show notes. And of course, as always, my link is there that if you click on that, that's going to get you to all of my links, my website, social media, YouTube channel, blah, 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 blah. So you can follow me, you can follow the Lux Files, you can shop, you can watch, you can listen. So it's all good. And Erik,
also, you get your universal discount code from the Enochian Angels, I assume you'll be sharing that in the show notes as well. Or is it?
And on that note, no, I'm just kidding. The angels said no, it's private.
Oh, damn. Yeah. All right. Well,
All right. And on that note, we're going to say good night to all the listeners. So.
All right. Good night, listeners.
Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Lux Files. You'll find all the guest links in the show notes, as well as the link www.leilokanzawin.com/links. That link will get you to my page of links, where you can then go to my Leilo Kanzawin website, the Lux Files page, and my Leilo Kanzawin YouTube channel that has all the Lux Files videos. It also has all my social media links there, so you can follow me and the Lux Files. And don't forget to subscribe to the Lux Files wherever you get your podcasts. And lastly, if you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving me a review. Until next time.